Indiana History Project. I'm your co-host, Norm Taylor. It's good to have you with us today. Always, it's been an honor to interview any of our veterans. It has always been the main focus of the Indiana History Project to make sure that we preserve the histories of our local servicemen that have given so much of their lives to for our freedom, for our country's benefit, and so anytime that I can have a veteran on the program, I'm very pleased with that. I just happen to have two veterans, and one of them has been with me the whole time. My goodness, Sarah Lee, we have been together now for so long that I even know your name now.
I remember you too.
And I can, yeah, and so you know that's a good thing. Whenever we can actually look at each other and say, "Well, you look familiar."
Yeah.
And but Lee, you been okay? How you been?
Yes, we're hanging in there real well. I brought you a veteran today, a Troop Carrier Command engineer on a C-47.
I'm sure
He's got a lot of good stories.
I'm sure looking forward to hearing the stories, because right in front of us is all the medals that we have and a lot of good material. And even if there would be a show probably just in the jacket that you're going to be talking about here after a while, but there's a lot of good things. But we do have Merrill St. John with us. Merrill, good to have you, my friend. And from Orleans, Indiana.
Well, I'm originally from Morgan County.
Oh boy, you moved south. Now you're a Southerner.
Yep.
Yeah.
I sold my little farm up there because Indianapolis was encroaching on Morgan County.
Yeah.
And we decided to seek out a small, little bitty town where nothing happens to move to. So that we could do some traveling and spend some time together.
Well, good.
But we moved in Orleans in 2005.
Oh.
And 2 months after I moved there, my wife was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and died 2 months later.
Oh, I'm sorry to
So
hear that.
I stayed in Orleans.
Oh, okay.
So I've been there since 2005.
Okay, so it's not been too long that you've actually been in the southern part of Indiana,
No,
this part of the Indiana.
But I've always spent a lot of time down in this area. Back 50, 60 years ago, I used to spend weekends at French Lick in the big hotel.
Oh, okay. Well, Merrill, were you raised in Morgan County then?
Yes.
That's where you were born and raised in?
Yes.
Okay.
But when I went into after I came home from the service, I worked on the New York Central Railroad for a couple of years, and then went to work for Firestone Tire and Rubber Company. And I managed stores then in several different cities and states, and worked there for 30 years. I retired from there and then went to work for Ford Motor Company, selling automobiles.
Oh, okay.
And
were you a pretty good salesman?
Well, I thought I was. I worked my way into management and worked the last 17 years for Larry Bird up in Martinsville at his Ford agency.
Okay.
I retired from there in 2002 at the age of 80.
Oh, you worked until you were 80 before you retired?
Yeah. I worked for two different companies for 60 years.
Okay. Wow.
And I'm probably one of the very few people that have worked for two superstars. I worked at one time for Mario Andretti.
Oh,
He owned a Firestone store, and Firestone sent me there to manage the store for him. And then after that, when I went to work for Ford, Larry Bird owned that Ford dealership, and I was his chauffeur. And
I say, did you get a chance to meet both of those gentlemen?
oh, I went with Mario to races all over the world.
Is that right?
Yeah, I've been to Spain, Germany. When he raced for in the Formula One circuit, he drove Ferrari, and I had a lot of admiration for Merrill St. He was probably the most pro-American person that you would ever want to meet.
Is that right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so he was easy to work with.
Oh, yes, he was.
Nice guy?
Absolutely. And, well, I'll tell you a little bit of a short story. United Way wanted him to come to New York City to make a commercial for United Way. So he wanted me to go with him. So I went with him to New York. And we go downtown to this big building, and there was floor after floor with plush carpets on the floor and mahogany desk and everything. And we toured that building, and finally Mario turned to me and he said, let's go. And the guy conducting the tour said, oh, we haven't done the interview yet. And Mario said, if you've got this kind of money to spend all over these fixtures, you don't need me begging for money. And we left. He never did a commercial.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's just the way he was.
Mm-hmm.
He was a great person.
And now I'm not. A lot of our guests are going to be very attuned to who he was, and I know who he was, but I've never been too much of a big race fan, so I don't know a whole lot. But what happened with Mario Andretti? When didn't he pass sometime back?
No,
he's still around.
Yep.
Okay. And do you ever have any contact with him?
I haven't had for about 5 years.
Okay.
And
is he still living?
in Nazareth, Pennsylvania.
In Pennsylvania. Okay,
Yeah,
that's what I'm
that's
wondering.
where their home was.
Okay.
Originally.
Now, where was he originally from? Italy?
Some town in Italy.
Yeah.
They came over here when they was about 10 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And he and his brother were pretty famous in all kind of racing, go-karts, and then into midgets, and then into big cars.
Mm-hmm.
But his twin brother never did. He had a bad accident and almost killed him, and he quit racing. But Mario went ahead and he won the world championship with Ferrari, and then also the '69 500.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. What year? I knew he was an Indy 500 winner, so it was in 1969 when he won the Indy 500. Oh, it's amazing.
And I think just about the same year, maybe the year after that, he won the Formula One championship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he had a really good streak there in that late '60s and early '70s. Then.
Yeah, it's a shame that as good as he was, that he didn't win more than one 500.
Yeah.
They always seem to have that touch of a little bad luck.
Did he come close any other time?
Yeah. I think he was second time or two, but he was.
Yeah.
He was very well respected in the racing circles.
Oh, yeah. That name, Andretti, is one of the biggest names in Indy 500, I know. Yeah. And even I'm not too big, like I said, too big of a race fan, but I'm very familiar with the name. And and he had a son that also went into racing and did quite well.
Michael, and then Michael's son is still racing 500.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And how old would Mario be now? Approximately.
I would say somewhere around, I would say 65 or 70.
Okay.
Pretty close to that.
Yeah. And so is he semi-retired? Or, do you know?
Yeah, I don't think he does anything except maybe make a few commercials and does some personal appearances and everything. He's a fantastic speaker.
Yeah.
Anytime he was making a speech any place, it was thrilling.
Well, and so that's kind of neat then through the years that you develop a friendship and a working relationship with him. What about Larry Bird? Did you ever get to meet Larry Bird?
Yep.
Yeah.
When he was playing basketball, every time he'd come to Indiana, he would call me to come and pick him up at the airport.
Oh, okay.
I was his personal chauffeur when he was in Indiana.
Is that right?
And I would either take him a new car to drive or else take him to French Lick or whatever he wanted to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No matter what hour of the day or night. Sometimes he would get in the airport at 2 o'clock in the morning. He'd call me and come pick him up.
Okay.
And I'd go pick him up. And I remember very vividly that when he retired, there was a big crowd of people at the airport about 2 o'clock in the morning when he came in. And it took maybe an hour for him to do interviews and stuff with the TV and everything. Mm-hmm. And we got in the car and started home. He said, now that I'm retired, that'll be the last time I have to do that. Uh-huh. I said, don't kid yourself.
Uh-huh.
About a month later, he had to go back to Boston for something. And sure enough, about midnight, he called, come pick him up at the airport. Mm-hmm. I got up to the airport, and here was 50 TV cameras, announcers or whatever you want to call them to interview him.
Uh-huh.
And we got in the car, and I said, "What did I tell you?" I said, "This is not going to end."
Yeah. How many years ago was that?
Let's see. I would imagine pretty close to. See, I've been down here 7 years.
So it's been way
Probably
before.
10, 12, 14 years.
So he's been with the Indiana Pacers and a lot of
long
time since
time.
then. So
Yeah.
Was he a pretty nice guy?
Yeah, we got along real fine. And I think mainly because whenever we were together, I treated him just like a son or just an ordinary person.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't bug him about his basketball and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And that's the reason he liked me.
Well, I think so. From what I've heard about him, and obviously I've never met him or that, but he's not one that really wants to be in the limelight.
No.
Even though he has been for years, but he's not one. I think he enjoys his.
Well, he seemed to gravitate more to older people too. Because when I'd go down to French Lick, there was always 3 or 4 older people, maybe somewhat near my age, with him there at his home.
Mm-hmm.
He had a big building there where he kept his vehicles and stuff and practiced basketball.
Mm-hmm.
And we sat around there and talked and everything.
Yeah.
But it seemed like most of his friends were older.
Oh, okay. But he was easy to talk to for you.
Oh, yeah.
And you enjoyed your time down there at French Lick then?
Yeah.
Yeah. And did you get down to the hotel and a lot of the old hotel?
Not so much in the last few years, but back in the 50s, when I was working for Firestone, I dated a girl that worked at a bank in Indianapolis, but her parents lived in French Lick.
Every time we have World War II veterans on, Lee, we get to this. Every time we get to these old girlfriends.
Yeah.
Except Lee's never talked about his old girlfriends on there, but every time World War II, so this is just, and I don't even ask about the old girlfriends, but it comes out. But go ahead, Merrill. Tell us about your old girl. Are we going to just hear about one old girlfriend or many?
Well, there were several.
Oh, I know, okay. All right.
There was one that I remember real well. Her name was Kay Billingsley. She lived at 28 Cromwell Street in Nottingham, England.
Oh, okay. Whoa. All of a sudden now we got girlfriends in England too. Well, anyway, we were in French Lick. Was there a girlfriend in French Lick too?
No.
Oh, okay.
The one that was from there.
Oh, okay. All right. All right.
So we used to come down there about every weekend.
Uh-huh. Okay. Okay. Well, we know there's probably a lot of girlfriend stories, so we'll get to them here in a little bit then.
One other one.
One other girlfriend story?
Well, not really.
Okay. Here we go. Okay.
But I had the opportunity to dance with Princess Margaret.
You did?
Yep.
Okay.
At a USO.
But that wasn't a girlfriend?
No.
Okay.
Because
that would really be a story.
her mother and father, I don't think, would have appreciated that.
Oh, okay.
See, one of my friends was a concert violinist before the war, and we had a box seat at Albert Hall in London, which was like Metropolitan Opera of New York City. And right next to our box was the King and Queen and Elizabeth and Margaret.
You know what he's talking about here, Lee?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
She's just a year or two younger than I was.
All right.
In fact, her birthday just came up. Just a couple of days ago was the Queen's birthday.
But
okay.
Over the few times that we was there, I mean, we were on a, hello, how are you basis.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a USO dance that Margaret and Elizabeth was to be the honored guests, And on a dare, I was asked if I would ask her to dance, and I said, sure. Because sitting in the next box several times, she knew who I was from being at Albert Hall. And we danced. And while we were dancing, I admired her dress. It was a beautiful dress. And for some reason or other, I said, I complimented on her dress and everything. I said, my mother has a button collection back home. She has over 2,000 buttons, and none of them are alike. She just reached down and twisted a button off of her dress and says, here, send it to her.
Wow.
I've still got that button.
Is that right?
Yeah,
My goodness.
yeah.
I bet you that was really a treasure for your mother, wasn't
Oh,
it?
yeah,
To
yeah.
get that button.
Yeah, she had it she had the ball fruit jars. You know what I'm talking about, those glass fruit jars?
Mm-hmm.
All full of buttons. And she'd count each button, and on the lid she'd mark how many was in each jar. But she had that button in a little plastic folder on the very top of her.
Oh, I bet. And that was a treasured
Yeah,
keepsake there.
Now, is this for Margaret or Elizabeth?
Margaret.
Margaret. Okay.
Margaret, okay.
I was talking about Elizabeth.
Elizabeth
Okay.
was a little older than
Yeah.
Margaret.
Okay. Merrill, you would have been born somewhere around 1925, 26, somewhere around there. 24, okay. And yeah, I was guessing. So you were raised during the Depression time.
Yes, sir.
What do you remember? A lot of our guests, World War II guests, can remember some of that time. What do you remember about being raised during the Depression era?
I remember being dirt poor. We had no money, but we lived on a farm, and we did have plenty to eat. Mm-hmm. And my father he's always been my role model. I never knew in my entire life that there was a cross word spoken between my mother and father.
Mm.
I never remembered it. And he would take produce to town to some of our relatives that had no way of having a garden or anything. And he'd make a trip to town with a horse and wagon once a week to take stuff to our relatives in town. And it was a tough time. And I sometimes wonder how my mother and father ever got through those times with all of the hardships that we had to face. Mm-hmm. And as I look back on it, I've always been thankful that I had the parents that I had. And as I got a little bit older, I learned that my father was getting smarter every day. You know?
You know, I learned that lesson too.
Yeah.
You know, we were one of the families that lived in town, and if it hadn't been for our granddad, we'd probably starve to death.
Yeah.
Because he's the same deal. He's bringing their food into town to us.
But one of the things that my father did when I was about 8 years old, we had some sheep, and one of the ewes had lambs in the barn, and one of them got behind a board. And when Dad found it, it was almost dead in the wintertime, in March. So he brought it to the house, and he told me, he said, if you take care of this little lamb, you can have it when we sell them. So I said, okay, I will. So we put it in a box behind the kitchen stove. I fed that little bugger with a bottle of milk every few hours and took care of it and babied it. And it come out of it and grew up. We put it back out with the rest of the sheep. Well, when time comes to sell it, it brought $9. And my dad came to me and he counted out $9. And of course, $9 back then was a lot of money. But he gave it to me because he said, I'll give the lamb to you. He never went back on his word. He said, now what are you going to do with your $9? I said, well, Louise Marshall down at the hardware store got a bicycle for $10. He said, where are you going to get the other dollar? I said, well, my older brother said he'd loan it to me. He said, well, it's your money. You do whatever you want. But he said, I would like for you to get on your pony and ride over to the neighbors, Fred Hines, and look at some of the little pigs he's got over there. So I got on my pony and rode a couple miles over to Fred Hines. And when I got there, here's these little pigs, little white pigs about this long, the prettiest, cutest little things you ever saw. I picked one of them up and started petting it and everything. And Mr. Hines said, how'd you like to have them pig? Oh, I said, well, would you sell them? He said, yeah. He said, I'll tell you what, I'll sell you 3 of those little sow pigs for $9.
Okay.
I said, okay. So he put them in a gunny sack, tied them on the saddle of my pony, and I took them home. Well, to make a long story short, from that period of time on, I never received $1 or asked for $1 from my parents. Never. Because I worked on the farm. We split half and half on the hogs. And when I went into the service when I was 18 years old, I had an automobile that was a 3-year-old automobile. I had 100 head of hogs. I had 20 beef cattle. I had a riding horse, 1938 Buick Century, and money in the bank.
All from that $9.
All from that $9. So my dad taught me a very valuable lesson early on. And I was able then, from then on, to take care of myself.
I hope that there are some young people out there that are listening to this story. Because, isn't that the way it is, Lee? That, when you worked around kids, you were a principal for a lot of years, you get a dime in your pocket, you're ready to go with it.
Oh,
but it sounds like this young man back then, that he invested it wisely.
Well, my older son took the same path. When he was about 10 years old, I had an uncle that raised registered Black Angus cattle. And we had just built our home there in Morgan County in 1966. I guess Stephen was 11 years old at that time. Anyway, my uncle called one morning and said he had a cow that died that had a calf, and if Stephen would want to raise it on a bottle and take care of it, he'd give it to him. So Stephen says, yeah, I'd like to have it. So we took the back seat out of the car and went over to my uncle and picked that little calf up, brought him home. Well, my son took care of it just like I did the pig. When he graduated from high school, he had a herd of 20 registered Black Angus cattle.
My goodness.
Today he owns one of the largest Honda motorcycle dealerships in the state of Indiana.
Well, that's the way.
There were some lessons to be learned through the Great Depression, wasn't there?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And how to manage your money. Merrill, before we get to your World War II service, and we're almost there, there's a lot of interesting stories you have.
Well,
I was wondering, you were born in 1924.
December the 3rd.
December the 3rd of 1924. So around 1933, there would have been another person that was emerging out of Morgan County that was pretty well known. And I guess you probably know where I'm heading with this. Did you remember back when you were young ever hearing about any of the exploits of John Dillinger?
Well, I can tell you this. My older brother was an expert marksman. He was a fast draw artist, and all of the law enforcement agents in Morgan County used to come to our farm to try to beat him shooting. And they would gamble, dollar shot. And that's the way my brother made all his spending money.
That was a lot of money. Again, you're talking about the Depression time around early 1930s.
Yep. I've seen my brother pick up 5 walnuts in his right hand, toss them in the air, draw his pistol, and break all 5 before they hit the ground.
Whoa.
Well, his reputation was so that one evening, just about supper time, car drove in the driveway. We lived about a quarter of a mile off the highway. John Dillinger got out, introduced himself. My dad invited him to come in and have supper with us.
Is that right?
He came to try to recruit my brother to join his gang.
Well, what year would that have been, Merrill?
That was probably 32, 33, somewhere around
So
there.
right there, because it was right around
See,
1933.
Morgan County, whenever John Dillinger would come to Morgan County, the sheriff would leave, go someplace else.
Mm-hmm. Is that right?
That's right.
He just
If he knew John Dillinger was coming to town, he took a vacation for a weekend? Okay.
Yeah, or he'd go the other direction.
Okay.
Nobody in Morgan County, well, they worshiped John Dillinger. See, he was railroaded to begin with. There was three people, three young men that got into some trouble. They robbed a store or something. Well, two of the people were of rich people. John Dillinger was the only one sent to prison. People in Morgan County knew that. He was railroaded, not railroaded. He deserved prison, but so did the other two.
Yeah.
But because they had money, they didn't have to serve prison. And so that's what turned John Dillinger the way he was. But there is absolutely no proof anywhere that John Dillinger ever personally killed anybody.
That's true. I have read that, yes.
Yeah. But
what was your, so you knew who John Dillinger was at this time, and that didn't worry you? I mean, this was, you were just a little kid. I mean, you had
look at, oh boy, he's, like some kid now would look at a basketball star or a football star.
Mm-hmm. And he was sitting at the supper table with you.
He was eating supper with us.
What was he like?
Well, he was a fairly good-looking guy, and best as I remember, around 6 foot tall, maybe weigh 170 pounds, black hair, very presentable-looking person.
Was he friendly to talk to?
Oh yeah, yeah.
And so at the dinner table, supper table, and I know, Lee, we're getting to World War II, but this is something that you don't get to hear very often.
You get to dig into this.
Yes, and
I knew you couldn't resist this.
There's no way I could pass over this. So at the supper table, was he talkative? Was there anybody else with him at the time?
No, he was by himself.
He was by himself.
Yep.
And so, but he was just sat down. Seemed like he just fit in with everybody.
Well, yeah. Of course, my dad, when he introduced himself, my dad knew who he was and knew the story and everything, and had a pretty good suspicion why he was there. To talk to my older brother.
And how old was your older brother at this time?
He was probably 19, 20, perhaps.
Okay.
He was 12 years older than me, so at that time I was probably 1933. I was 9. He was probably 21, pretty close to 21.
Wouldn't this have worried your dad that he knew that he was there maybe for that purpose?
No, because my mother and father had enough faith in the way that he was raised that he wouldn't do something like that.
Okay.
And he didn't. He turned him down. No, I can't do it.
So as far as you know, Dillinger maybe had taken him over at the side, just talked to him and asked him about this, but did your brother ever talk about this later on?
No. It was just subject over and done with. That's it.
So Dillinger was at your house for how long that evening?
Oh, probably 2 or 3 hours. Best that I can remember, he was driving a Ford. Back then, a lot of the gangsters used the Ford because it was faster than most of the other cars. Mm-hmm. But
What did you go when you were a kid like that? And I'm going to get off the subject, man, but this fascinated me. So after Dillinger went, if I would have been an 8 or 9 year old kid, boy, when I'd have got to school pretty soon, I would have had to tell everybody. Did you do that?
No.
That John Dillinger ate supper with you?
No.
You didn't talk about it? Nobody did?
No, my father and mother asked us not to ever mention it. And we never did.
Well, Merrill, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay, so whenever in 1934, when he was killed, then the people in Morgan County.
Oh yeah, they mourned him. Yeah. Yeah.
And in Mooresville, I know his funeral was at Mooresville there, and I know it was a big thing. But But well, you've already had enough stories. Well, we can just go on now, Lee. You know, we don't have any. We're boring. We're boring people. You and I are.
We'll do the World War story later.
Yeah, let's get to World War II on that. That's okay. Now, I know there's a lot of more stories in there, but let's get to the World War II. Okay, did you go and enlist in the service?
No, I was drafted.
Okay, and what year were you drafted then?
In 1943. I graduated from high school at 17 years old. I couldn't get a job because I wasn't 18. And when I returned to 18, I couldn't get a job because it was draft age. So my dad asked me if, I wanted to go to the service. And I said, well, if they want me, I'll go. Well, about a week later, I got my notice from draft board. So Dad said, now, if you don't want to go, I can get you a farm deferment. I said, would that make you happy? He said, no. I said, I'm going to go. So I got on the bus with 23 other young people from Morgan County, and we went to Fort Benjamin Harrison. That was on March 3rd, I think, in 1943. And that's where I started out, Fort Benjamin Harrison.
Yeah.
And
what was your basic training like there at Fort Benjamin Harrison?
well, at Fort Ben, there wasn't any training there. That was just an induction center where you had to take your physicals and your aptitude tests and this sort of thing. And of the 23 that went with me, I was the only one that was left there. For some reason or other, they all shipped out in 2 or 3 days, and I was left there all alone with nobody I know.
Well,
and
how come they didn't take you along?
Well, they asked me if I had any preference to what branch of the service I want to go. And I said, no, I'll go wherever you need me. Well, consequently, I guess my aptitude test showed that I needed to go to the Air Force. All the rest of them went to other branches, Navy and infantry and everything. And 5 days later, we was at roll call one morning. There was a whole bunch of guys. Big sergeant with a bunch of stripes on his sleeve walked up to me, handed me a stack of papers about this high. He says, here, take these 286 men to Shepherd Field, Texas. I said, what? I said, I've never been on a train. I've never been out of the state of Indiana. I don't even know where Shepherd Field, Texas is.
Okay.
I said, I can't do this. He said, you'll learn. And turned around and walked away. And here left
And you've never even been out of the state?
I've never been out of the
Hardly
state.
out of the county, because, I mean, yeah okay.
And I was scared to death. But I got everybody together. We got on that daggone train 3 days later. After a train stay, we had to change trains in St. Louis. And I lost one of the guys. And that worried me to death. Well, we finally got on to Shepherd Field, Texas in 3 days. And the 4th day, this guy showed up. So saved my hide. But that's where basic training was at Shepherd Field, Texas.
Okay, yeah.
And
well, so for a Hoosier kid now that you're in Texas, what was basic training like in Texas for you?
well, it was quite interesting. Of course, everybody.
I mean, you've had supper with John Denninger. How things are going to be more interesting than that there, Merrill?
Well, I mean, as far as we knew that there was a war going on, and we knew that there was a possibility that you might not make it through.
Mm-hmm.
But we did a lot of drilling, a lot of marching, and a lot of road running. We'd take 10-mile road runs. You run 9 minutes and walk 1, and getting physical training. And we went out on bivouac and lived like you was digging foxholes and eating K rations and all that kind of stuff. But one of the things I remember vividly, they had a strict rule against throwing cigarette butts on the ground. You had to field strip them. You tear the paper off. Of course, back then you didn't have filters. Tear the paper off and take tobacco and spread it out. Roll the paper up in a little bitty ball. When they miss, you never seen a cigarette butt laying anywhere. But one day, without thinking, I threw it on the ground. I no sooner threw that thing on the ground than some officer said, "Private." "Yes, sir." Pick that cigarette butt up. I picked it up. He said, "Now," he said, "you go and get a shovel and you dig a hole 6 foot square and 6 foot deep and bury that cigarette butt."
6 foot by 6 foot.
It took me all day,
I bet it did.
but thank heavens the ground in Texas was kind of sandy and was pretty easy to dig.
Okay.
But that was my first lesson in following the rules and regulations.
I bet you never threw down another cigarette butt, did you?
As a matter of fact, I quit smoking.
Oh, that's probably good. How long were you there in Texas then? Your basic training?
Best as I remember, it was about 4 months, I think. And then I was sent to Sioux Falls, South Dakota for radio operator mechanic school. And that was a 6 months course. You had to learn Morse code and how to build radios and repair them. And when I graduated from that school, I was sent to Sedalia Army Air Base in Knob Noster, Missouri. That's where the 441st Troop Carrier Group was activated. And on the way from radio school to Sedalia, you had a 10-day delay en route furlough. So I went home to visit the folk. First time I'd been home in almost a year. But anyway, when time comes for me to go to Sedalia, I go to the train station up in Indianapolis. My order said, Sedalia Army Air Base, Knob Noster, Missouri. The guy said, "Well, I never heard of Knob Noster." I said, "Well, that's what my orders say." He said, "Well, I have to get the train station master." So another guy comes. Well, he said, "I don't know where that is." So they got a big book down off the shelf. They go, "Oh, Sedalia Army Air Base is located at Warrensburg, Missouri, but you get your mail through Sedalia and you're stationed at Knob Noster." So I got on this train, finally got there about 1 o'clock in the morning, dark. Train pulled up and stopped, and I got off, and I was the only one who got off. And here's this platform and this little lean-to building, and nobody around. I thought, where in the world is the Army Air Base? So I was standing there, maybe 30 minutes or so. The guy drove by in a pickup truck, a farmer, and he stopped. He said, "Soldier, do you need a ride?" I said, "Well, I'm supposed to go to the air base. Where is it?" He said, "About 2 miles down the road." He said, "Get in, I'll take you there." So he took me down there. Well, that was my first introduction to Sedalia Army Air Base. But anyway, as people started arriving, I was one of the very first enlisted men to join 441st Troop Carrier Group. And then I met some other people coming in. And finally, when there was enough people to form a squadron, we were assigned to cruise. So I was assigned with the second lieutenant as a pilot and a corporal as a flight engineer or crew chief, and me as a private, as a radio operator mechanic. Now, from that point in time until the end of the war in 1945, we three stayed together on the same crew. Probably one of maybe nobody that ever had the same pilot and the same crew chief for the whole war.
That's unusual, isn't
It
it?
is. It's very unusual. I wanted to ask you, when you were at Sioux Falls radio school, that's where I went.
Did he?
Yeah, I went through there, and
Oh, I had a good time in Sioux
November
Falls.
'43, I got up there. Did you get up? When were you there?
Well, about that same time.
You guys might have
We might have crossed
may have
paths.
crossed
over there.
paths.
What
didn't
was
even
your
know it.
class number? I was at 68.
Oh, I was
Class
100
number
and something,
68.
128 or something. I was behind you. I'm sure I'm behind you.
But anyway, Sioux Falls was good for me. I was in basic training with a boy from Sioux Falls. His sister and her husband owned a drugstore right downtown Sioux Falls. And he told me, he said, if you ever get to Sioux Falls, I want you to call my sister. She'd be glad to help you any way she can. I said, okay. Well, I got to Sioux Falls and I never thought any more about it. I was there maybe a week, 10 days, 2 weeks. I got a phone call one day. This is Mrs. So-and-so Trimble. I'm so-and-so's sister. He told me that you were supposed to call me. So we got acquainted. She come pick me up. I got a pass to go. And they had at that time, a fairly new Chevrolet car.
Mm.
And so we started to spend quite a bit of time, her and her husband and little boy. And it finally got to the point to where they would let me have the car, borrow the car. They had gas coupons, and I had a couple of teenage girlfriends there in Sioux Falls. And that's about as good as it could get.
Well,
Having a car. And
Lee, I knew we
gasoline.
was going to get back to this. We always do with these
Back to
World
the
War II
girls.
veterans. Yeah, I always have to. We're going to have to just show these late night. They get to. Okay, you had two girlfriends then.
Well, one really best one, but the other one was a sister.
Oh, okay. All
But,
right. All right. A and B. One and two.
B,
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
But anyway, it was a good place for me to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. Had a lot of good time too.
Well, I interrupted you. You go ahead back to Sedalia.
All right.
You go back to Sedalia.
You go back. Okay. All right. So now, okay. We were now we're out of Sioux Falls.
detoured.
We're back to okay.
back to Sedalia.
Okay.
So anyway, at Sedalia, we started to form an air cruise, and we finally got enough people that we took a flight up to Bearfield and Fort Wayne to pick up our new airplanes. And I think this one trip we brought back 23 C-47s. And I brought this along with me. You see this little folder?
Yeah, I see the folder here.
See what it says here?
Yes, sir. Okay. Let me put on my glasses. We have the, this is 10-10-31, RO number St. John.
Okay, radio operator St. John and aircraft 42101031 was the serial number.
Okay.
That folder was issued to me at the same time we got our new airplane.
Okay.
And that folder went with me on every mission and every place I ever went. And it is now near 70 years old.
Oh, my. Okay. This is good shape.
There's something on the front of it. Turn that over.
Okay. This is, we have, I'm going to kind of show this to everybody here, but there is some writing on here. Now, it looks like maybe some towns, cities. Is that it? That's written on this folder?
Yeah.
And it has, well, let's see here. Well, there's all kinds. Well, can I read? Merrill St. John, the Indiana plow jockey. We've got this, folks, right up here.
Yeah.
You won't be able to maybe tell this, but yeah, Merrill St. John, the Indiana plow jockey. Is that what they nicknamed you? Okay. Okay. Well, that's good. All right. And it has another here, Leonard Williams.
That's just a friend.
Oh, just a friend of yours. But then we have Fort Benjamin Harrison, Sioux Falls, Sedalia, Pope Field. Are these the places that you're going to go to?
Yeah, I've been to all those places.
Okay, well, we're going to run out of time before we get all this dinner because we haven't even, we're at Sedalia right now. We haven't even got to Pope Field. We haven't Lumberton or Maxton, Homestead, Puerto Rico, and there's a bunch of girls' telephone numbers on here. No, no, I'm lying about that part. But okay, or is there? Maybe there is.
He's looking for the numbers.
Yeah, he's looking for the numbers. No, the numbers won't be any good now, Merrill. You're too late to call them now. Oh. Okay. Well, folks, there is a girl's number on here. Okay, well, we'll try to call her. No, that is Nottingham, England. That'd be long distance. Okay, we'll call her. There is a girl's number on here. Okay, all right. Back to okay. What else can I say about that? Okay, here we go. Yeah, there's all these places. So this was with you the whole time. I'm going to ask you about this folder again because looks like a dagger or something here. Merrill. That was just a doodle. Did you do that?
Yeah, just doodle.
Okay, you're just doodling here. But this one with you, is Nancy a place or is that a name?
No, that's in France.
Okay.
On the border of Germany.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so this is a fascinating. It's 70 years old, but this is. Besides the girl's number that is on the inside here, there is a list of everywhere that you have been in. And so when you were transferred somewhere, you wrote it down.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Very good. And you've been able to keep this then for 70 some odd years. So in the contents of this, what's in the contents in here then, Merrill?
Oh, it's just stuff.
Okay.
I keep this
Stuff you've had then for over the years.
Yeah.
Something like this.
I got one just like it.
Okay.
I'll be darned. I've got one.
You just like this is still in great condition here.
Yeah.
But what's this here?
It's a technical school manual for Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
Okay. So you guys may have actually just
we
crossed
probably
paths with each other, and then you wouldn't have known this, but and this is still in just excellent condition. You managed to keep all this then all those years, Merrill. Are you a pack rat?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
I've got receipts at home that my father kept, papers, deeds to property, and everything dated back as far as 1803.
Now that's where he did his service.
Okay.
That's them.
Okay. Now, guys, you can obviously see I can't read through this, but the 441. What's it say on the front?
441st Troop Carrier Group.
Okay, so then when did you get this? This was date August 1st, 1943 to August 1st, 1944. So somewhere along that line when you received this.
Yeah.
What was this for?
Well, that was it for. It's a story about the 441st and with pictures and.
Okay, it was a book that was
service record
about a history of this.
A directory.
Okay, well, I'm about afraid to look there. There's a lot of different kind of pictures, and again, that's the only girl's phone number I found on here, I think, so far. So that's a good thing. Let's see, a lot of great pictures, and I'm kind of interested in this. What is this here?
Well, that's just a little thing I picked up in London.
Mm-hmm. Got like postcards or something with it there. Artistic views of the Capitol. That's neat. That's neat. And this would be 70 years old or so far. So, my goodness. Okay.
See, there's a story about the 301st Squadron. That was my commanding officer.
Okay, your commanding officer right here. It was right here at the top. That was your commanding officer there. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's fascinating. We have. We're not going to get all this story in today.
We're not. Look on the back of that one. Are you pulling a glider there on the back, Merrill? Is that pulling a glider
right here?
That's where his whole service would. C-47 pulling gliders.
Yeah.
Full of troops, and they went into D-Day.
Oh, is that right?
That's the reason.
Yeah, I was aiming to bring a picture. It was in Stars and Stripes.
Yeah.
It shows my airplane with my tail number and my squadron letters, pulling gliders off.
You dropped supplies at Bastogne when they were surrounded.
Yep. These stories, I tell you what, Lee, what we're going to do is that if you'll come back, Merrill, would you come back and do another show with us?
Well, if you would want me to.
Well, yeah, we want you to because we're running out of time, and that gives us time to look up KG Billings of in England. I got a kick out of that number. Well, this is a treasure trove, but we have so much here, Lee, that the medals and all the World War II stories. Let's do a second show, okay?
I think we should because
Yes.
he has a fantastic record, combat record, and the things that he
Here's
did.
Okay. All right, we have a. Oh, okay, signed by General Dwight Eisenhower. Wow. We're gonna finish. Let's see. This dollar bill right here is signed by General Eisenhower.
Yeah.
Well, there's a story here.
And also Martha Hemingway.
Martha Hemingway too
Yeah.
signed this.
Yeah.
Well, okay. There's too many good stories. We're going to have to. I tell you what, folks. Merrill, we're running out of time, my friend. You've had such great stories, and we didn't even really get to the World War II part. This is going to be Merrill St. John Part 1. It would take another show just to talk about all his girlfriends he had on the overseas. But no, so we may have to do several shows. But we're at least going to do one more show in which we talk more in detail about your World War II. Lee, anything, and I'm going to have to wrap it up. Anything that you want to? We'll do a second show, right?
Yeah, I think we should.
You're for that, okay?
I think we should.
Folks, we will do a part 2 on Merrill because we haven't even got to time. He has had some interesting World War II experiences in the midst of some of the action. We do not want to just fly through that. I want to be able to preserve this, so we're going to have another show here in just a few minutes. Merrill, we're going to have you back.
Okay.
And Lee, thank you for bringing Merrill and making the contact
Well,
here.
Bart Dye told me about Merrill.
Okay.
And I have to thank Bart Dye, too.
All right. Well, we're going to have him again. Folks, I know that you've been interested in this. I know we will have the second show, and hopefully very soon, so keep tuned to the Indian History Project. I'm Norm Taylor, your host. I'm co-host, actually, with Lee Hutchinson, World War II veteran and author. It has been a great show. I've had Merrill St. John with us, and a fascinating stories, my friend.
Well, like I've tell everybody, it was an experience that in 2 years, 10 months, and 28 days, there was so much crammed in there that most people have only read about. I have seen places of history and visited places that are famous that most people have never heard of.
Yeah, and you've met people that there's a history trove.
And I have considered myself very fortunate. I am not a hero by any sense of the word. I was one of the fortunate people that got back without any harmful injuries.
Yeah.
And I thank my Lord for that. And I'll be glad to come back if you would want me to.
I want you back. Well said, my friend. Okay, remember that we'll have part 2 later on. This has been the Indian History Project. Thank you for watching.